agenda. We have with us tonight John Myers, who's an attorney out of Springfield. They're very familiar with formation of water commissions and dealing with water entities. So John's been gracious enough to donate his time tonight to come and share with us what he knows in terms of water commissions and organizations. So we'll turn it over to him, and then we've got a few other business items to deal with later on the agenda. I'm Max Midnorth with Miko Engineering.
I'm John Myers.
Bob Mans with Hennigan and Associates.
Al Davenport, Jersey County Rural Water.
Greg Bates, manager, Jersey County Rural Water.
Mike Springman, Jersey County Rural Water.
Tim Sayer, City of Carlinville.
Steve Woodford, representative for Fosterburg Water.
Mark Goodhart, I'm the manager for Fosterburg Water.
Debbie Dunlap, treasurer of City of Carlinville.
Gary Isringhausen, Alderman, City of Carrollton.
Joe Montanez, Mayor, City of Carrollton.
Rick Golan, water plant operator, City of Carrollton.
Mike Snyder, Director of Public Works, City of Carrollton.
Just Matt Turley, concerned citizen.
Here.
Dandy Shirley, retired Jerseyville Water Department.
Caleb Call with City of Bunker Hill. Ronnie Paul, Hennigan and Associate.
Todd Clark, trustee of Foster.
Deanna Genizio, man of Carlinville.
Brian Mitchell, chair of the Water Commission out of Carlinville.
Cindy Campbell, alderman, City of Carlinville.
Very good. Thank you, folks. Again, just to do a brief overview of what led up to the consideration of the formation of the commission is the City of Carlinville approximately 3 years ago undertook an evaluation of their water supply. And included in that evaluation was a review of either purchasing water or developing a new water plant at the city lake or a new groundwater supply and associated treatment and transmission. The culmination of that, what we found was the most cost beneficial alternative was developing a groundwater supply. And as that option appeared to show feasibility, there were several other interested parties that expressed a desire to learn more about what the possibilities existed for partnerships. And out of that was born an application that the City of Carlinville filed with the United States Department of Ag Rural Development for a planning grant to evaluate that very option. And that was the scope of the grant, was to look at feasibilities for the partnership amongst the expressed entities that had shown interest in this regional concept. Those entities included the City of Carlinville, the City of Jerseyville, Fosterburg Water, and Jersey County Water. And so we conducted a full-fledged preliminary engineering report per rural development standards. It went through review through the state engineer and the state office and was subjected to their criteria in terms of looking at present worth analysis and what alternatives existed for developing that wholesale or regional supply. And so that has been concluded. The report did show feasibility. We looked at 4 different options, and the first option was a development of a 10 million gallon supply, relying on developing that supply in the area of the City of Jerseyville's aquifer and the Illinois River bottoms. And options B, 1, 2, and 3 options for the second alternative was a scaled down original plant size down to 6 million gallons a day as an initial capacity. And the most feasible of those options, looking at long-term growth capability, was the infrastructure in the ground, the piping in the ground, developing that for the long-term 10 million gallon transmission out of the plant, but eliminating an elevated storage tank and just starting the treatment plant at the 6 MGD rating with the ability to expand as demand was presented, or additional demand was presented. So at the conclusion of that, again, we did get approval from rural development to move forward. And so each of those entities that had expressed interest were presented with the question of, if you're still interested, please verify that and nominate a representative to take part in this combined effort. And so again, there's been no formation of an entity yet. That is one of the next steps, is to formally organize the entity. There have been pledges from each of the interested parties of Carlinville, Jersey County Water, and Fosterburg. The city of Jerseyville recently looked at a variety of options, including selling their system, so we do not have feedback in terms of a commitment yet from the city of Jerseyville. So they're still out there looking at feasibilities. But to this point, we do have some commitments from the other three entities to at least evaluate the feasibility of moving this idea in this commission or water co-op forward to see if it does make sense to develop a combined supply and distribution system. So with that, if there's any detailed questions, I'd like to open that up later on in the evening. You do see that there are some exhibit maps here that show what the scope of the project looks like and some of the hydraulic criteria that were utilized to conduct the preliminary cost estimates and sizing. And so again, that's on the exhibit board in front of you in the front of the room. But I would like to get into turning over to Mr. Myers and hearing what he has to tell us about this group's options in terms of organizing.
Okay, thank you. My name is John Myers, and I'll just start out by saying I'm not angling for any legal business tonight because I'm going to retire next year. And this would be a 2-year project, at least, probably longer than that, to get this thing up and running. My experience, I've been, for better or worse, representing municipalities for 32 years now. Amazing for me. In my past, I've established 2 water commissions, one of which is still going, and another which folded quickly when, after some feasibility studies and whatnot. And I've represented the Otter Lake Water Commission for many years, and I represented the South Sangamon Water Commission, which of course was Chatham and New Berlin. Some of you may have heard about that. And I know Max, of course, from a couple of these water commissions. He asked me to come down and chat with you folks about possible ways to organize your entity. Now, basically, I assume that, I could be wrong, but the municipalities involved in this proposed entity are all non-home rule municipalities. Is that correct? Okay, because that may make a difference. The entity that I'm most familiar with, and because I've set these things up and I've represented them, is the so-called Water Commission. Now, the Water Commission is a creature of statute. It's a creature of what's called Division 135 or Division 136 of the Illinois Municipal Code. In a division, and these 2 entities are very, very similar. The only difference being that in a Division 135 Water Commission, the entity, the municipalities who are members each get 1 vote, 1 representative, and 1 vote on the commission. The representatives can either be an elected official or an employee of the member municipality, or a resident of the municipality who's appointed, by the mayor with the advice and consent of, the board of trustees or the alderman, as the case may be. The difference in the so-called Division 136 Water Commission, it's the same setup, except that if it can be set up so if there are any municipalities with over 5,000 population, they get more votes than municipalities with under 5,000 population. So you get in a Division 136 commission, you get 1 vote for every 5,000 population or part thereof. So if you have 6,000, you get 2 votes, or if you have 9,000, you get 2 votes, as opposed to someone under 5,000 gets 1 vote. These water commissions, as creatures of statute, they're actually separate entities in the sense that the statute says they're a public corporation, but the courts have recognized that what does that mean, public corporation? Well, what the courts say is they're a type of municipal corporation, and consequently, they are totally subject to all the things that municipalities are subject to: Open Meetings Act, Freedom of Information Act, Prevailing Wage Act, you name it. Those of you who are from municipalities, you know all about all those things that you have to do in running your governmental operations. All those things apply to a water commission. But what you get in return for that is you get what I refer to as a legal safe harbor, okay? Because the water commission is established by the statute, and says if you do A, B, C, D, and E, you're legal, all you gotta do is those things. Whereas if you start mixing concepts that are outside the safe harbor, you open yourself up to criticism that, well, you know, where are you authorized to do this by the statute? And for those of you, well, you're all from non-home rule municipalities, you know how important that can be. You gotta make every effort you possibly can as a non-home rule municipality to stay within the statute, whereas a home rule municipality can do whatever it wants to unless it's forbidden by statute. Non-home rule, you can only do those things that are in the statute or necessarily implied. So my advice to my clients over the years has always been, if you're non-home rule, find that safe harbor and stay within it. Now, these water commissions have a lot of powers. They've got eminent domain powers. If you need to condemn property for a water plant, you can do it. I mean, we all know how difficult and time-consuming and expensive these condemnation actions can be, but in a pinch, you can do it. You can condemn easements. You can condemn whatever you need for your operations. Also, you have what I call public lands superpowers. Now, the entities that have public lands superpowers are water commissions, and oddly enough, private water companies like the Jersey Water Company has public land superpowers in the statute. It's in the statute pertaining to water districts, but it's also listed in there that private water companies have public land superpowers. That's my term. What it means is that a water commission or a water district can put its transmission lines in any public lands of the state of Illinois. Okay, and so when I set up the South Sangamon Water Commission, it was really important because we had to run our water lines through many miles of property owned by the city of Springfield. The city of Springfield was, shall we say, not very friendly when it came to the existence of this water commission. But when you got superpowers, they can't say no. I mean, they can give you a hard time, but they can't say no to your putting your transmission lines in public lands. And it's not just county highways. It's public parks. It's lakes, like Lake Springfield. We didn't use it, of course. We had the right to go through it. But these potentially, I don't know what the political environment is around here. Could be everybody gets along. But if everybody doesn't get along, these water line superpowers may come in handy. A water commission can issue revenue bonds, and those revenue bonds do not affect the GO bonding limits of the member municipalities. And in a rather strange addition to the Water Commission, the Division 135, a couple of years ago, the legislature said that water commissions can issue what I call double barrel bonds. They're alternate revenue bonds, so that the water commission, the problem with the statute, water commissions have no taxing power, but the interpretation was that if you can have these alternative revenue bonds, if you just like an alternative revenue bond in a city, if you pass the tax levy ordinance in the member municipalities that provide the security for the bonds, you do it that way. So the water commissions can do that. When you're a member of a water commission, you are bound as a municipality to do certain things, number one of which is you gotta pay the water commission at the rates that are established by the water commission for the duration of whatever bonds are outstanding. You can't just say, you know, this wasn't a very good idea, this turned out to be more expensive and more hassle than I'd hoped. No, you have to enter into a long-term contract, and the contract must be sufficient to pay the bonds and the operating costs of the water commission. So, you know, that, I guess that's the downside, but it's if you don't do that and one person gets mad and they pull out, then everybody else suffers. So that's kind of the water commission. You will notice there's nothing in the Water Commission Act for participation of private entities with a vote. It's not allowed, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that a private entity such as the Jersey County Water Company couldn't be a wholesale customer. Of course you can. You can, you know, enter into the same long-term kind of supply contracts that anybody else can, because the Water Commission has the power to enter into long-term supply contracts with customers, but the private entities don't get a seat at the table. And, you know, that's not my doing, that's what the statute says. Okay, the next entity I want to talk about is the Municipal Joint Action Agency. Now, the Municipal Joint Action Agency is something I've never set up. In fact, I don't know that there are any around here. I think there's some in northern Illinois. But fundamentally, it's similar to the Water Commission, except that the agency created can consist of member municipalities, public water districts, townships, state universities, and counties. Don't ask me how this came about, but that's what the statute says. This is part of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act. In a joint municipal joint action agency, again, the agency is a separate municipal corporation by statute. The agency is governed by a board of directors with one director from each entity. Anybody, you know, entities other than municipalities and counties and water districts, et cetera, can be wholesale customers, so you can sell to private entities. Again, the Joint Action Agency is a legal safe harbor for non-home rule municipalities. And I'm put here that it has public land superpowers. That was a cut and paste from the water code. I'm not sure that's true for a municipal joint action agency. Interestingly, the Municipal Joint Action Agency has no eminent domain powers on its own, but it can use the members' eminent domain powers, borrow those eminent domain powers, if you will, to condemn easements or lands for the waterworks. The Municipal Joint Action Agency may issue revenue bonds, and it also has GO bond powers subject to a referendum. Go figure. So the third type of entity, again, this is what I've never seen, but it's an option that's always on the table. And that's to do an intergovernmental agreement that is different from a water commission or different from a municipal joint action agency. And you can set up an administrative board, but again, I always recommend that people stay within the established safe harbor of the Water Commission or the Municipal Joint Action Agency, and then you know that everything you do is kosher. But it is an option. You don't get the municipal superpowers. The bonding authority would have to rely on the bonding authority of the member municipalities. But you could set up a form of governance that isn't the same thing as the Water Commission. If you were to do this, get yourself a good attorney to bless this thing and make sure that everything is fine. Another type of entity is the private water company. That's what we have here. Municipalities can be customers of a private water company and can enter into long-term supply contracts. And what private water company can also purchase water from any source, public or private. There's no restriction on you guys. You can receive USDA financing, that, as you know. I'm not telling you that you don't know, and that can be extremely attractive. And if you're a nonprofit company, and I don't know if you are or not, but if you are, you have public lands superpowers, just like the Water Commission. And if you're a cooperative, you're exempt from rate regulation. Now, if you're not a cooperative, I'm not absolutely sure that you would be subject to rate regulation. That's one you'd have to deal with and have your attorneys look at. The last kind of entity I want to talk about is a water company that's a public-private partnership. Okay? Now, some people are doing these things around the state. And what you do is you form a board of directors, and the board of directors consists of members of private entities, such as a private water company, and municipalities. I was asked by a municipality who was considering setting one of these up, what did I think? And what I told them was, don't go there. And the reason you don't want to go there from a municipal perspective, or such was my advice, is that we're now all operating in a different world than we were even when I started practicing, 30 years ago. Social media, you got the Edgar County group, you have citizens groups, and you are operating in a fishbowl as never before. It's fishbowl city for municipalities. And this is why I always recommend that you stay within a legal safe harbor. If it's iffy, swim toward the safe harbor, because if people get mad at you because your water rates are too high, they will dissect everything you've done. And as an example of that, when the South Sangamon Water Commission was set up, there were some very disgruntled people in Chatham, and they brought in some outside people and agitated and raised hell, and Chatham ended up paying about $50,000 to a Chicago law firm to look at everything that had been done by me, most of it, to determine whether it had been legal or not legal, okay? And so, of course, the Chicago law firm said, yeah, it was fine. But the point is, when in the atmosphere in which we all are living today, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just a fact of life. In this atmosphere, we have to really cut square corners and make sure we're abiding by the rules. Now, interestingly, these private-public partnerships, they've never been challenged. They rely, and I've talked to attorneys about this, and the attorneys say, no, we have the powers to do this under the Intergovernmental Cooperation Article of the Illinois Constitution. And I respect that opinion. I certainly see why people would say that municipalities have the power to enter into these public-private partnerships, set up a board of directors, own stock and all that. I respect it, but my advice to my clients is always stay within the safe harbor, don't go making stuff up, and stay safe that way. The other problem that when you get one of these public-private partnerships, the question then becomes, okay, well, what about all these government and sunshine laws? Are these public-private partnerships subject to the Open Meetings Act? Are they subject to Freedom of Information Act? Do they have to pay prevailing wages? Are they subject to Family Medical Leave Act, for example, which municipalities are subject to, whereas private companies with under 15, I think it's 15 or 25 or whatever the number is, are not subject to the Family Medical Leave Act. And so those of you folks who are used to operating in the private sector, and you may find that this whole thing a little uncomfortable, because it seems to me that when you have an entity that's composed of 6 municipalities and 1 private company, I don't see how you can say that's not a public company subject to all this stuff. But there's no guidance from the courts on this. I do know this, however, the USDA has no problem with these entities, and the USDA is perfectly content to loan money to these mixed entities. But if you're going to do that, find yourself an attorney who will walk you through all these complicated issues. So that's, Max asked me to come up with some thoughts. These are my thoughts. This is not legal advice. These are thoughts from a guy who's been in this arena for many, many years. And you want to get your own attorney before you set this thing up, and I've given Max some ideas on who you might want to call if you're going to proceed. Are there any questions about any of this?
Does the commission just have board members that are municipalities, people on that the municipality wants to represent?
Yes, and here's how it works. Typically, like you take the Otter Lake Water Commission. Tim, you know about the Otter Lake Water Commission. The members on the Otter Lake Water Commission are either people who have been appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the village board of the city council, or they are municipal officials, either elected officials, sometimes the mayor, not usually the mayor, sometimes a trustee, the so-called water trustee, sometimes they're the water plant operators. Pawnee recently appointed a gentleman who's a farmer, and he's a very well-heeled farmer, used to all kinds of complicated financial stuff. And the Otter Lake Commission was happy to have him on there, because Dennis, Dennis, who's the general manager, said, I can use the help. So you can have all kinds of people on the commission, but they either have to be elected officials or they have to be appointed citizens of the municipality, or they can be employees of the municipality.
Like in the instance of Craig with South Sangamon, he was appointed by the Sangamon County Board.
That's right, and you have one member appointed by the Sangamon County Board, by the county board of the county in which most of the waterworks are located, which I take it here would be Jersey County. So if you have like the Otter Lake Water Commission, they have members who are in Sangamon County, but most of what they have is in Macoupin County. So Otter Lake has a member appointed by the Macoupin County Board. And the South Sangamon Water Commission, all of it is Sangamon County, so they have a member who's appointed by the Sangamon County Board. And I think the point of having a county representative is because when you're running these transmission lines through miles and miles and miles of rural areas, there are people out there who, you know, they wanna sign up, they wanna become customers, they want hookups, and also they have concerns about, you know, what's going on in, you know, either in their field or out in the ditch of the county road. And I think the county representatives are kind of there to look out for the interests of the people in the county and make sure that their voice is heard with respect to the operation.
You know, on the not-for-profit side
Yeah.
of a corporation, I
Yeah.
know Hennigan's had some issues where when they were trying to run the water line down the right-of-ways, there was people that claimed they owned to the center of the road.
Yes.
Did that get resolved, or?
I don't know, that's a subject that has troubled me for my entire career. When, you know, people own to the center of the road, okay? And, well, if you ask yourself in a municipality, if inside a municipality, if people own to the center of the road, the municipality can still put whatever utilities they want to. And why is that? Because the courts held, way back when, that putting utility lines in a municipal street is a customary and proper use of the municipal street, okay? Well, there were court decisions from, you know, 20, 30 years ago, the infamous Kitty Lewis case, which involved a telephone utility that held, no, if you're putting utilities down township roads and somebody owns to the center of it, that's an additional burden on the fee, so you gotta pay for an easement, okay? Well, when you look in if you look in the Water Commission Act, or the Division 135, or if you look in the Water District Act, or if you look in this provision in the Water District Act that refers to private companies, they say that it's a proper use of the road. Well, my contention has always been, well, if the statute says it's a proper use of the road, that means we have the right, unlike, say, AT&T, we have the right to put our utilities lines in the rural roads. It's never been tested in court, though. That's me talking. So, as you're probably well aware, it always gets into a negotiation situation. My contention would be that you can put your lines wherever you want to in a public road. That doesn't mean you don't have to necessarily, you don't have to pay compensation, but you've got the right to do it. There's also a provision in the highway code that addresses this situation too, which applies to public entities. I don't know if it applies to private entities. It's complicated. Money usually wins the day. Yeah.
Is a public water district considered a municipal for this definition,
It's-
or not a municipal?
A public water district is a municipal corporation. It too is a body politic, and, but it's not a municipality in terms of being a member of a water commission
That has voting rights?
that has voting rights, correct?
So in the scenario of the three at the table today, Jersey County Rural Water, Fosterburg, Carlinville, only Carlinville by this definition has an automatic seat, voting seat.
What's
One of the other two would have to be in by county appointment.
What's Fosterburg?
Public Water District.
What's a public water district? Well, you could do the joint action agency. The joint action agency specifically refers to public water districts having a vote at the table.
Well, let me ask it another way. So with Otter Lake Water Commission as an example, is that all municipalities at this point? Are there
Yes.
water districts or companies in that group?
There are, Otter Lake has some customers that are not municipalities, I think. I know South Sangamon does. but only the member municipalities have a seat at the table. And in fact, for a period of years, there was a municipality that was a wholesale customer of Otter Lake that was not represented on the commission. But the statute also says that if you're a municipality, you've been a customer of the commission for 20 years, you're automatically let into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Anything else? Everybody's looking so glum.
One other thing on the
Yeah.
not-for-profit side, we've made some progress over the years, being able to get USDA funds and EPA revolving loan funds.
Mm-hmm.
And we also are tax exempt now on maintenance parts and materials where we weren't
Yeah.
before, so that's helped some. And we're only taxed on the land, not the structures now.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically, the only way that Jersey County Rural Water would have any input to the commission would be either through option 4 or option 5. Am I correct in that assumption? The
Well,
water-
option 4, that scenario is you're a customer.
We wouldn't
Or,
say,
or either that or the municipalities are a customer of yours. In other words, you could own the production plant and all these municipalities be your customer. Or the municipalities can own the production plant and you're their customer. What I'm saying is, I think it's problematic to have an agency set up that has public and private players with a vote. Well, again, there are attorneys who see it differently. And they haven't been sued yet. But my position is that if you did get sued, you want to make sure you're in that safe harbor. Yeah.
So just to clarify, to get equal footing, but with the 3 entities tonight, you'd have to go with option 5, for all of them to be voting members.
That's correct. And as I said, there's no, in my opinion, there's no safe harbor there.
Yeah.
But I can give you the name of an attorney who disagrees with me.
What's that?
I'll give Max the name of an attorney who disagrees with me on that.
But doesn't number 4 also allow it to happen where they can create an entity of mixed?
No, that's problematic. Option number 4, I'm just talking about the rural water company. There's already one sitting here at the table. That company can either be the supplier to all the other entities. In fact, there could be you could set up a water commission and buy the water from these guys if they own the plant. You know, but what I'm saying is you can't mix governance. Somebody has to be a customer of, either the private has to be a customer of the public, or the public has to be the customer of the private.
Should the county board create an agreement wherein their delegate is the representative or the chief official with Jersey County Rural
but we
Water?
really couldn't, represent Jersey County Rural Water in that thing, because we're not-for-profit. We'd be the
You'd be the
private.
at-large county member.
Well, I think what he's asking is, if you're friends with the county board chairman, could you see to it that you were appointed to the commission? And the answer to that is yes. That works for the first 6 years.
Right.
Because
Right.
because
that's not a good
because
way to do
these
it.
members have 6-year terms.
Yeah, that's not a good way to do it.
Well, it might work for the next 6 years too, but
That's
the
not a
point
good
is,
way to do it.
it's not carved in stone that you've got that
It's
right.
not a good way to do it.
All right. I guess I'm done, thank you.
Any other yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I wouldn't miss my first 9 practice class. Yeah, for sure.
I'm jealous with your first statement of the night that you're retiring.
Yeah, well, you know, I guarantee you, I've been to more village board meetings than anybody in this room, having represented as many as 6 at a time, and right now I've got 5, so.
Thanks, John.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Skipping down on the agenda to item 4, it seemed like that would be one of the next things, is to talk about an attorney to bring in the booth. What are your guys' thoughts on organization?
The way I see it, you know, the way I see it right now is that Jersey County Rural Water is kind of gonna be the black sheep in the whole process. And if Carlinville and Fosterburg wanna run with it, we could be a customer, but we're really not gonna have any say on anything else.
Yeah, unless option 5 was the selected option.
Unless 5 was a selected option. The way he talks, that's like walking through a minefield in Vietnam, and I've done too many of them already.
But if you do that, Alan, wouldn't Jersey go be on the, wouldn't you be on the hook for the $80,000 for the plant?
Pardon?
Wouldn't Jersey Rule be on the hook for the $80 billion? But you're gonna have the plant?
I would tell you that we'd have to agree to be a customer, you know.
What he's saying is the other 200 he's asking Carlinville would run the plant and then be a buyer.
We'd be a guaranteed buyer, probably the way it would.
But in the setup, it would be basically between Fosterburg and Carlinville to get everything going. In other words, they would be the ruling domain.
I didn't realize they couldn't form.
I think it's worth mentioning, though.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly about, we've talked a lot about Gateway Water Company, and in this definition with this handout, they're basically number 5, and that's worked successfully for many years with a joint mix of groups, public water districts, not-for-profit water companies, cities, towns. You know, it's a mixed bag of 14 different groups. Completely respect everything Mr. Myers said tonight, but it goes to the legal advice they've sought over the years and that they've received, led them down that path, and it's worked very well for them for many years. So.
Where's their legal advice from?
Their current attorney is David Foreman out of Salem, Illinois. Their original attorney when they were formed, Tim, is, I don't know that answer, but I can get it for you.
I think it'd be good for the whole group to know.
Yeah.
If they wanna if they wanna ask some questions or
Yeah.
somehow try to get some answers or something that would, I think it'd be valuable, especially at this point.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's like with anything, you know, if you ask Max and I both a question, we're not always, we have different interpretations based on our experience and things. It's gonna be the same going through it.
I mean, I agree. I'm exactly with you that I value John Myers' opinion, but there's other entities that are formed like Gateway that are outside the realm of what he just explained too, that are very successful right now, so.
And as you go through that attorney selection process, those are good questions to ask, so you get that advice going forward. I will get you those names.
Yeah, and when John sends his list, I'll send those to you. And I think basically that would be the next thing, is just conduct one-on-one conversation with each of those attorneys to get a comfort level as to their expertise and their history, so that you don't feel like you're navigating through a minefield.
I think Gateway, if they've been successful, I mean, my intention would be that everything we do would be above board and correct. We will make mistakes, as everybody does, but not, you know, I just have I'm the township supervisor also, so I'm in kind of in some government, teeny bit, But to make a long story short, I mean, the Open Meeting Act, the Freedom of Information, if you've done everything right, what's wrong with giving them? I have seen no problem at all. In fact, I welcome people if they wanna see the books, because here they are. But, you know, I feel very uncomfortable with, you know, an elected official having to be on the board, and, you know, and all that stuff. It makes me a bit uncomfortable. Doesn't mean we wouldn't buy water, it just means that I would be uncomfortable with that.
Something else that's worthy of note, and you can see it in John's last bullet point, is the eligibility for rural development funding. You know, Carlinville went through that on their grant. Those agreements and any funding element that rural development participates in has to pass their litmus test in terms of the organizational charter for that entity. So much so, they have an office called the Office of General Counsel. And those are the array of attorneys that they plow through intergovernmental agreements.
Because they don't wanna lose their
organizational
money.
charters. That's exactly right. And that's really why, when you see the size of the reports and so forth, that a lot of that is borne about by the federal regulations that have to be adhered to. So I look at that as a good litmus test, that if rural development looks at it as a viable entity, you're not breaking new ground. You know, if it's something they've dealt with before.
What's Carlinville think?
About what part of it?
About what type of, public-private partnership do you think it could exist?
I think it needs to be an equal vote. Everybody has a seat and has the right to get their one yes or one no in, and
I mean, our goal is to supply water. I mean, isn't it?
that's what makes it work.
It's to supply water.
Fosterburg's concern is that everybody has an equal say, has an equal share. And for you to either own it or for us to own it, that would be setting off dynamite down in our hometown. And we've been telling everybody's gonna have an equal say. And I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Cindy? I don't disagree, because I think we've all come and said we wanted to have a board that everybody has a vote, and out of respect for the people we represent, that we need to try and hold true to that. I would say, just from my point of view as being elected, your intention is always to do everything above board and do everything by, you know, the sunshine laws, and your intentions are always good, and mistakes still get made. And then, you know, there's a whole host of problems that come along with that, even if your intention was good and you made a mistake. So I have to say that, for me, I think I would like to hear the opinion of another attorney who says that this is a viable option, that it can be a safe option for all of the entities involved. Not just us, but for everybody. Nobody wants to end up in a lawsuit or making a simple mistake that turns out to really hurt the entities that they represent. So I would feel more comfortable if we had a second person come in, talk to us, somebody who thinks that this is a viable option, before we make any decisions about it.
Absolutely.
I don't feel comfortable saying anything other than that, really.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%.
Another thing to consider is you're casting new clay here, and I think the goal of everybody is broader participation. And at least opening the door up for entities that may want to join in the future. And if you build the model correctly at the beginning, it eliminates a lot of redo or undo as you go through the process. So I think with that in mind, if you could structure this so that it does have that adoption capability, it's going to allow you to grow and see the success of Gateway's.
So I think
I think it'd be,
an attorney tonight.
I think
wouldn't
it'd be a good
recommend it.
idea for the group to have the same opinion that was rolled out the Gateway and the way they were formed with the different entities at this point, because, I mean, right now, we're kind of stuck with, you know, hearing what John said, but, I mean.
You don't have enough information tonight to make
No.
a decision.
Absolutely not.
I think the other thing that would be a benefit is if Gateway would be willing is to share with this group their bylaws, so that you can look at the organizational charter and what conditions they build in to protect each entity.
How long have they been in this? 14?
I believe that's correct.
Around 13, 14.
They'll have a pretty good idea, I would think.
And they have a track record.
That's what I mean.
And so, and it has grown from what it started, right?
Yeah.
They've added members.
Yeah, they were 9 initial members, and they're up to 14 now.
Really?
Things are going well.
It looked to me like their bylaws are pretty much like rural development's format.
You know,
Well,
that's
they
a-
were funded,
that's a great
they were
litmus
funded
test.
by rural development, so it passed that same test Max is talking about. We'll ask that question, we'll get permission to share out those bylaws, that won't be a problem. I can take it one step further, I can see if David Foreman would come up and do a similar educational process. He's the attorney now, just about how it works. They just had a new member come on in the last 12 months, and so they're very familiar. They just did another bulk purchase agreement. I can see if he would be willing to come up and talk through that, if that can help.
Yes.
I think you need more information.
Okay.
I mean, I know from talking to Jack, which is the, facility manager of Gateway, that they've received several grants, funding. I mean, and you guys know all about that, right?
Yes, they're eligible as a applicant, just like the city of Carlinville is, Tim.
Yeah.
They receive millions of dollars over the years.
Let's talk too about eligibility for discretionary funding or grant funding for each of the participating entities. Because that was a conversation that we had early on, was to leverage the maximum amount of grant dollars. Each entity brings something to the table in terms of low to moderate income eligibility for specific areas, and if we can pool those opportunities, I think that casts a broader net for potential grant dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. In the Gateway model, what happened was, there was Gateway as a new entity, the parent group that had to obtain funding for like the raw water, the intakes, at the lake, the pumping stations, the major transmission main. So there was a big funding package for that, and then along the route as they went, these 9 entities, water districts and communities, they were all each individually eligible for things like USDA rural development funding. At that time, state DCEO funding, there were discretionary grants going on. So they were able to pool all those individual communities and water districts along the way, in addition to the larger funding for Gateway. So that wasn't known on day one, just like this group. We can't tell you exactly today. We know what funding is out there, but we don't pretend to know how that mix is gonna be in the end. It could be a mix of USDA rural development, EPA's loan program, some of the individuals. Jersey County Rural Water has individual eligibility, Fosterburg has eligibility. So it's pooling all those and working with those funding agencies to get you probably the most grant dollars we can, mixed with your best blended interest rate between those entities. So.
Do you know what the percentage of grant money that they receive for Gateway, the regional part, the plan?
Total?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of the project as a whole, Greg, in terms of the total, and it was under 50%, I would say. It's probably in the 40% range, just doing some quick mental math. I can get you exact numbers if that can help. Yeah, but those range from multi-million dollars of grant from rural development for the large undertaking, and it was a lot of $400,000 grants to individual member communities, which was the limit for DCO. And what they did then was they were able to get very creative, and you're aware you can only do that in a single year. They would hold it and award one grant at the end of the grant year and the next grant 1 month later, so they in essence would get $800,000 over a 2-month period. So the funding agencies were able to work with us and pull off some pretty creative funding. And from what they're telling us at the national level, you know, they're ready and willing to try those same things. Programs are different now, programs will be different next year and the year after.
I'd say before any actions can be taken, we need to get to the next step of determining what the most logical approach on organization is. And then that's gonna give the group the ability to then organize and then start completing subsequent action items. So, we've got just kind of an open item there on, item 7 for open discussion. Obviously, action item number 1 is to, get our arms around the gateway model and get that attorney in front of you guys. When we get the list of the other attorneys, we'll send that out, and I think it'd be helpful if you guys see one of them that sparks your interest or attention to flag that. And I would suggest having, if that's the case, having multiple contacts or schedule presentations from each of those attorneys in succession to give you the ability to call it an interview, but to gain a comfort level with each of those individuals.
Illinois Rural Water might also have some people that they've dealt with.
Very true, Greg.
Has anybody got an idea for a name for this entity? Have you been thinking? No? We could have a contest.
How about you, Owen, you going?
Pardon?
You going?
You know, Tri-County, Quad County, something like that.
Twin River.
See, that implies you're gonna be taking it out of the water, the river.
Well, we are, really.
Yeah. You know, something like that, I thought about that Twin River, because we're Illinois, Mississippi, about that. That people might think we're taking surface water, so, that might
Would you
not
say
be-
Midwest something, Midwest regional, or
Yeah, like Central Midwest or
Central-
South Central
Midwest regional?
What's the name of the aquifer?
Illinois alluvial,
I'm sorry,
the Illinois alluvial.
there you go.
That would be my suggestion.
That's just
Even
the
for
thought.
the source.
That's the source.
Put that on the next agenda, everybody will come up with a name. Those are all good thoughts.
Kind of speed up timeframes, would you guys be willing, if it worked for the attorneys, to not wait 4 weeks, but maybe give 2 weeks for the next meeting? Would that make sense?
Have to look at my calendar.
Okay. Let's do this, we'll shoot out an email once we get minutes put together with solicitation for date availability and get consensus based on that. And part of that discussion will relate to the availability of the attorneys that you guys want to talk to. And we'll
How many do you
together.
think, just off the top of your head, how many do you think that have dealt with this type of thing?
John mentioned 2 other names
Two
that
other.
seemed pretty strong with that background. So you could potentially, I would see possibly having 3 separate contacts.
I mean, if we could
And
get
it's-
more players in the meantime, that's even better, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's possible, Greg, that the attorney you select to set this up in Foreman might have specific expertise in that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's your attorney forever for all your business. There might be other expertise as you go through the process and get into rural development funding and those kind of aspects. It's another consideration.
And that's a great point, Bob, because you hear us talking about rural development a lot. They're really the big driving entity in the funding and just the networking with rural water and big water projects. So they're a wealth of information, and they're obviously one of the biggest players in terms of funding availability. So we do rely on them a lot for feedback and
Yeah, and
making sure
Mike
we're in
Wallace
check.
in Illinois is really big about getting extra money for Illinois.
He's done great.
Done a great job.
He's kind of
He's
shooting
won-
lights out at the federal
He won
level.
awards the last 2 years for
very impressive what they've been able to do.
For those of you that don't know it, Illinois gets a pool of federal money through rural development, and then if other states don't use their money, the other states that need more money can apply for it and get the additional money. And Illinois has done that the last probably 7 years.
So he's been able to fully utilize the original allotment for that fiscal year and acquire additional supplemental funding because they've had an overabundance of applications. They've been able to process them.
Where'd you say Gateway's located at?
Down by Centralia,
That's,
most of us here have went and actually met with them and visited their system. And it was very, very good trip, and we took a couple groups down.
Pretty simple system, in other words, their plan is very computerized.
Yeah, it's a
Does a
surface,
great job.
it's surface water instead of groundwater, but I mean, basically, it's the same principle other than the water source. And, it's been
That's just the
very
only choice they had, and,
Yeah.
they will love to have had the options you guys
Yeah,
are looking at.
and, they started out with even Centralia being in it. And, Centralia wound up going out of it, but then they picked up a bunch of other ones, and it was very interesting how it all developed. But they've only had to raise their rates one time in that 14 years, right?
Yeah, they had one rate increase.
It is.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think
and they're all in the, they all got a representative on the board, and we met with several of them just to kind of find out how they got going.
And that rate increase, just to follow up on that, was partly because they've done a great job and they're efficient, but also because as other communities added in, that additional usage is the key to the whole regional concept. As more people add it on, more usage happens every day, that cost per thousand for everybody. You could say it gets lower, it maintains so that they don't have to do a rate increase, and that's been the beauty of the system. Growth helps everything.
As some other entities added on, Bob, who was responsible for the money getting it to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's been a mixed
Just like
bag.
if Carrollton should line down the road, who's gonna put that transmission line on?
It's a great question. The way Gateway is handled, they don't have a set policy that says like, Carrollton, if you want on later, you're 100% on your own. But they've looked at the big picture of how much is it, what's the cost, what does that do to the cash flow of the entire system. They weigh that cost versus the payback of what's their daily usage gonna be, what's that gonna do on the other end of it. And so far with Gateway, by and large, that has evened out, or it hasn't been enough of a difference. They've had this cooperative effort from day one of, yeah, it's gonna cost us, but if we do that for Carrollton, tomorrow they could land a big business that uses additional water, and that, again, that helps us all out. So that's in general how they've looked at it as a board. But every opportunity that comes up, they have us look at it, run the numbers. What does it cost to extend, just the things Max and I do every day. And then they present it to that Gateway board, and they make an assessment of, here's the cost, here's the benefit, what do you guys want to do at the table, and they talk through it, and they've been able to work it out very well. It only happens because of what you three have said tonight. I think you all three said, everyone, equal say, equal vote. In my mind, we can run numbers all day and give legal and engineering advice, but it's because those people are all there for the same goal, to keep that cost at the absolute minimum for the region. That's why it works.
I think everybody just wants to be fair with each other and
Yeah.
with every entity.
And that's where they're at, and that's why it worked. It's not because we run great numbers, it's they want to be good neighbors, basically.
Okay, I think we've got our action items spelled out for the next meeting. We'll work up a availability of dates and a list of attorneys for you guys to consider. And
We'll work up a list of names, won't we?
there you go.
I've got two for you right now.
Do you? We might get so good, we'll just draw one out.
We're all here, Mark. What do you got?
Well, gentleman over there said the Illinois Alluvial Regional.
Yep,
Me personally, I kinda like that.
okay,
And then the one I was talking about was Central Southwest Regional.
okay.
Those are just the two that I came up with. So, by all means, anybody else, please chime in.
I don't know.
I like the Aquifer region, I like that.
Tells you what you got.
Sounds really good.
Thank you.
You might have wanted free pizza tonight.
Yeah, free pizza.
I really need them.
Okay, folks, is there anything else to throw on the table before we break up?
Harold, do you guys have any questions about what we're doing? I mean, I know it's kinda, you understand that you'll be buying water from a regional, you'll have a vote on the regional, but you still keep your in-town. The only thing you won't have is a plan.
Right. Set your own rates.
Yeah, you'll-
Your own customer.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll be buying at a certain price depending on what the regional concept is or what the regional numbers are, which we've got some numbers that we could show you on that. But, and estimates, of course, we don't know exactly where we're going yet.
Right.
But, you would still maintain the whole city infrastructure, that's still all your, you
Everything
return
stays the
your
same.
rates.
Right.
But you'd have a say in the regional concept on the board of the plant.
Yeah. Because its operation will determine the cost of your water to you.
Right, exactly, exactly.
It's all not for profit, so you have no shareholders, you know, and I know from the township level that, like I'm bidding a job right now, and it's gotta all be done at prevailing wage. And it's gonna cost me probably time and a half what it would normally cost me if one of the people in the township were to build it, you know? And so I'm sitting there going, I've got taxpayers' money that I'm spending, and I don't wanna spend any more than I have to, because they don't wanna give me any more than they have to.
Well, let me ask the question another way, so, and this goes for everybody, I'm gonna put Jerseyville on the spot in a minute too, but as this group of three who's decided to move forward, does move forward, is there anything they can do, or information they can gather, or put things in a handy chart that helps your group make a decision on what you're gonna do for the future at this time? I mean, we appreciate you being here, we're glad you're here, but moving forward, they're gonna be getting to the point as that smaller group of making decisions about sizing and daily usages. Is there anything that can be done?
And the time frame we're looking at is probably at least 2 to 5 years and maybe more, is that right? I mean,
To the ideal conditions, 5 is
probably
pretty
more
realistic.
realistic.
I know Fosterburg, I think, mentioned at our meeting that they upfront or did a promise of payment for monies. Would that be expected of Carlton, and if so, what would that amount be? And then, well, I guess we'll start with that question.
It's a great question. Does one of the three members want to tackle that, or would you like me to?
All right, we promised, our board promised, what was it, 25,000 in exploration. That'd be for hiring the attorney, forming the corporation, getting the ball rolling. And I think Fosterburg, 50,000.
Up to 50,000 if needed.
If needed. Now, that doesn't mean we're gonna spend that, we might spend more. But that's what our board approved the last meeting. And so we're going to, put this money in as we move along. Most of that will be recouped, the way I understand it, when the whole project's done. So that money's gonna come back. So in other words, we'll get it started, and if it goes through, then when the plant's in operation, that money will come back to us, because it's gonna be a debt on that entity, that separate water plant entity, the whole thing. If it falls through, we lose our money. In other words, if it doesn't go to the end, we will lose that money. And so we've dedicated that much money to the feasibility and getting it started.
Do you know what your, like, your break-even point feasibility is? Like, with you three, is that enough right now?
Fosterburg's promised 50.
Mark's
No,
grant.
no,
Okay.
no, not necessarily on the dollar amounts getting in, but if Carlinville's in, Fosterburg's in, I guess Jerseyville Water's in, is that a big enough customer base to get started?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like
Gonna be dependent on everybody's individual situation.
Mark presented a graph at our last meeting, it was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Showed-
He had all the break evens and all, the first 4 or 5 years without Jerseyville, the first 4 or 5 years, our costs will be more than what we're paying now. With Jerseyville, it'll almost be the same,
Actually saves some.
you know. But if you project it out 20 years, there's a significant difference.
So
And we projected it with rate increases of Illinois American, typical of what they've been doing.
So that's for Fosterburg and Jersey County Rural Water.
Right,
For you, that 4 years may be different.
right. I
Maybe
understand
five.
that.
You've seen the general graph that we
Right.
showed you, it was on, we can get you
Right.
paper copies of that, so you understand the general concept, I know you do. But
Is there enough?
But the answer is, these three are here at the table because they believe the feasibility is there
It's
without
already
anyone
there.
else in the
It's
room.
already there with
They
those
are
three.
moving ahead and trying to get
Okay,
final numbers.
that's-
So we're gonna have to give them what those numbers look like today. Anybody else that adds in after today is gravy for the group.
Okay, that's basically, if we
That's
had
the
enough
bottom
to go
line.
forward now, is there enough to go forward?
And to further answer your question, I can't speak for the group, they've gotta make those decisions, but generally, like in the Gateway situation, the way it worked was, if you're putting seed money in,
Mhm.
you're at the table helping make those decisions. If there's no seed money at that time, you're kind of a visitor. We want you to be there, we hope you come in at some time, but you've gotta understand, they've made the commitment, they're making the decisions. That's the bottom line of how it worked. I'm not speaking for them, but that's what I've seen happen in the past.
Yeah, you explained that to us, that's Carol.
Yeah.
We understood that.
Yeah. So there's no ask today if you're not asking to be involved in the decision making, but the hope is that, and I'm saying the same thing to Jerseyville, that their elected officials aren't here tonight that I see, but we've got a member from the citizen committee, and so I think they're the same thing. I know they're going through the decision making process. They don't know if they're in or out today. They have not committed to do it or not to do it, but I believe they're still interested in,
I believe
is
so.
it a viable option?
From what commissioners have referred to me, they're still considering it.
Yeah.
As to why they're taking this long, I can't answer that, because I don't know.
Jersey County Rural, before this project was ever really introduced, our commitment to Illinois American is up in about 6 years. And we actually explored building our own water plant by ourselves. We use about $1 million to $1.5 million, maybe on a good day, $2 million. But we explored doing our own water plant because we really realized that Illinois American, and they're a business. They're a for-profit stockholder business. And I've got a 403, and I'll be meeting with my advisor, if I ain't making money, I'm gonna do something different. And it's just that simple. And so anybody that owns Illinois American, they wanna make money. Well, we're gonna have a state-of-the-art modern plant. We'll probably be producing it as cheap as anybody can produce it. And it'll be groundwater, not surface water, so we just figured we need to do this. We just need to do this.
Your current water supply, do you soften your water?
No.
What we're looking at is lime softened water, so that's an added benefit. 'Cause most of us here, we don't have that. And I know my customers have griped at me over the years, why the hell aren't you softening the water? You really don't wanna pay the rates.
Well, my wife in '93, they switched us over to Jerseyville water, and it's softened water. Well, she was just thrilled to death. I mean, the soap suds and everything else. I mean, it was great. Then when we went back, well, we're back at it again.
I'm not saying that's a driving point, but it's just an added benefit. It's like, to us, it's a better product that's either gonna be equal to or quite possibly cheaper. chances may be a little bit more. But if I'm looking inside soft water and it gets my customers off my back, as long as it's not too way out there, I'll look into it. But the numbers have gotta be right.
Do you have a question?
I know this is an actual public body. I didn't know if public comment was allowed, questions. But, I mean, I've got a few questions. If I can have the floor for a few minutes, tell me if I go too crazy. Max, I understand it was public record that you said at one point that 4 entities were going to be required for this to happen. That isn't what you said?
That's not what I said. We based the report, and that's what rural development funded the report on, was those 4 entities that expressed interest.
Okay.
But as we saw at the last meeting, the numbers actually were with 3 entities.
Yeah, I didn't see those numbers, so I didn't realize this group was meeting till recently. So I've only been at a few Carlinville meetings, so I'm definitely not totally informed. So if the questions are stupid, you can tell me that. The 25,000 seed money, how did you come up with that amount when the other entities came up with 50? Then you're saying you're at risk of that 25 if it falls through. You're only at risk of 25. The other entities are at risk of 50 then.
First off, there's no guarantee that if everybody in this room put in 50, the pool never, that would exceed for any individual buy-in of more than 5, 10, 20. Who knows where that number's gonna be? That's just a commitment. And over the course of the first year, it may be a very small amount to secure somebody to come in to get things started. In years 2 or 3, it may progress more, but that pool that they've committed to may never even see attrition.
Okay.
All 3 of the entities,
Before loans start.
all 3 of the entities give equal money as needed. We just allocated up to 50,000. But if we need 5,000, Jersey Mill's gonna put up 5,000, Fosterburg's gonna put up 5,000.
Okay.
Okay. What you also have to understand.
Well, maybe we need 10,000 more, we're gonna put another 10,000.
Okay, I understand.
What you also have to
Yeah,
understand
not
about
too soon.
Jersey County rule is that we're not a government entity. A board meeting on the second Thursday of the month can up that ante at any time.
Right.
According to our budgets and everything.
And we were kind of in the middle of, or the end of our fiscal year, so we didn't have it.
So again, next year we could say, well, okay, we'll put another 25.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. You could go back and
We just
revise
don't
it.
want to bring it up every meeting, hey, you gotta put more in the kitty, more.
Right.
Up to that amount. When we reach that, if we reach that amount, we'll put more in.
Okay. Tim, I heard you say on a radio interview that we might have to find a different aquifer location. Did I understand that correctly?
Yep. If Jerseyville, depending on Jerseyville's participation or non-participation, we could either move north or south.
Okay, now, is that going to delay the project significantly, or have those already been vetted?
We were looking at way upriver for Carlinville before Jerseyville Rural Water or Jerseyville or anybody else was ever thought of in this whole deal just to go all on our own. And
Okay.
that was 3 years ago. So I don't think one way or the other, there's still a plant that's gotta be developed. There's a lot of things that's gotta be done. At this point, it may slow it up somewhat, but it's not gonna make a 5-year difference.
Okay, well, I mean, my concern is just the amount of time. I feel like the water situation in Carlinville is critical, and we've talked about this. I've asked questions at meetings before. We've got the adjustable intake in process, I understand that, but it just seems like we're really going to be, up to the wire here on usable water in Carlinville. And the other 2 entities aren't in that situation, I don't think, because you've got, it's more about price for the other 2 entities.
I think that's drawing a lot of conclusions and assumptions that nobody in this room knows whether we're in critical or non-critical. I mean, we had a water main break yesterday on a 14-inch line and 10 minutes longer and we could have drained half a town. So what's critical and what's not critical?
Yeah, anything can happen. I get it.
I mean,
okay. Let's see here. So how would you guys buy out your contracts with American if this went live 2 months from now?
Well, we can.
Okay. So you're going to be.
We gotta fulfill the contract, and then Gateway had the same situation where people were in contracts and basically you just come on when you're able to come on.
Okay.
Carlinville citizens were informed that entities in this room, contracts won't expire until 2028, and somewhere in that neighborhood.
2026.
Yeah, but so far I haven't heard 2028, nowhere on the board, have you?
No.
And you're only, what, 5 or 6 years?
6 years.
And we'd even talked about, as a board, some sort of a compensation to the regional while we were still not on.
To make sure.
To make sure that the payments could be done to USDA.
Okay, so the way I'm hearing that is, at least if, depending on the speed this happens, Carlinville's going to basically be not on their own technically, because you just said you might throw in money, but you're not going to be using it as an actual source potentially when it goes live as soon as Carlinville would be. Is that fair to say?
Well, we don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know when it's gonna actually be ready to be built. If it's 5 years, it's gonna be awful close,
It's gonna be very close.
where we may be buying water directly right away.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
And it's gonna be a flat rate based in any quantity minimums, or we don't know yet? Flat rate no matter volume, or like, is my rate gonna be the same as Carlinville's, be the same as?
That's the intent.
Yes.
It'll be a cost per thousand, right?
It costs per thousand. And that's why, you know, you would be on the board to maintain the best you can those costs. But yeah, all the water leaving the plant should have the same price.
There'll actually be an ordinance that defines that. And that's, again, if rural development's a funding partner, they have to look at that ordinance. Rural development will want an assurance that there's a revenue stream sufficient to retire the debt. And so that's based on projections of usage, and that's how the rate's derived.
But that's not an engineer or rural development decision, honestly. I see the 3 members who are in the game all shaking their heads yes, so, but Jerseyville, for example, that's a big question I know they have, is how does that work? We've got valuable wells here and all this stuff, how's that gonna happen? And the gateway model has been flat rate and it's worked great, but it could also be that the group decides maybe different players do have different rates, and so that's where we'll ultimately be decided.
Yeah, and during the introductory conversations, just to speak to what Bob was talking about, if there is a particular entity that has an asset to contribute that has value, there is a work to that, just like as you were going to hire a contractor to build that asset, there is value there. And so that was really one of the determining factors that Jerseyville wanted to look into, is what is the actual value that we're gonna assign to the assets that they could contribute towards the project. So that gets incorporated into the project development costs, just as a construction cost would be included. And so that is effectively a credit. If that asset's incorporated into the project, Jerseyville would realize that, or whatever the entity was that brought that asset to the table, would see a credit for that contribution. And whether or not that's amortized out through a reduced rate or an upfront connection payment, there are a variety of mechanisms available. And again, that is an administrative decision on how that's processed. But I keep going back to this litmus test of rural development, but that truly is one of the final factors of, is it a legitimate way to retire debt and compensate?
And if Jerseyville was out, it could be Carroll. Well, it could be that, what he's talking about.
Yeah. So there isn't a predetermined rate structure for each entity. There is this flexibility of enticing participation and contribution of assets, if that makes sense, for the greater good, and there should be compensation for that. Well, thank you folks for coming out. We had some good discussion and some good thoughts provoked. So we'll, like we said, we'll pull together availability of dates, send that out via emails, and then get the next meeting pulled together as soon as we can. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.